All right, good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to be here to share with you all what I've been looking into for almost the past decade. And one of the reasons I love this venue in particular is because this is something that I have learned directly from you all. In my research, everyone here counts. And what we've been looking into are the effects of early development and chronic inflammation and how they apply to brain health and potentially neurodegenerative diseases. But first, my own path, my own story into how I became interested in behavioral neurology in the first place was through my passion for the neuroscience of art. And in my mind, these three individuals here were seminal in stoking that flame. The first, Norman Geschwin, the father of behavioral neurology. And what he had taught me is that how we're built matters. Here's a cartoon of the brain divided into some of the constituent anatomies, but basically it can be broken down into a conceptual framework of their functions that are in the top of the brain, functions that are in the bottom of the brain, functions in the front and the back, functions in the left and the right. And essentially, the tensions, dynamic tensions between these coordinate systems make us who we are, our individual personalities and strengths and weaknesses and the like. And perhaps the easiest example to wrap your head around is left-handedness. I'm left-handed. How many people in the room here are left-handed? Excellent, I like you better. But we're different. Our brains are structurally, on average, different. So I bet mine is different, but some of our other left-handed colleagues are very reasonable people, and so maybe they're a little bit more like right-handed brains. But on average, we see that folks maybe choose occupations because of who they are and their strengths and their weaknesses. We see more left-handed artists, architects, art school graduates, and the like. Maybe some stockbrokers too. Only the good ones, only the ethical ones. But the next important sort of person for me, Samir Zeki, introduced me to this concept of artists as neuroscientists. I was a double major in college, fine arts and molecular biology, and so I really love this notion that art, when you go to the museum and you see a beautiful painting, it's telling you something about your brain or about the brain of that artist. If you hear a wonderful symphony, it's tapping into particular neurocircuitry, and the reason that something is so sublime to you is very personal. It's how you're built. And so here's an example of a very famous artist, a favorite artist of mine, Willem de Kooning. One of his most famous paintings before, when he was a young individual, and then in the throes of having something like Alzheimer's disease. And you can see that there's an artistic change, a change in the aesthetics, a simplification, a reduction. And then we have Dr. Bruce Miller, and I offer that he is the father of. And then some people say, well, is it you? Is it me? No, we're not related, but we tell the same joke over and over again. But when my real father came to visit the Mac, he made sure to introduce people to say that, no, he is my real father, not Dr. Bruce Miller. But Dr. Miller, in 1996, had made what I think is one of the most seminal findings in art and neurodegenerative disease, capturing a new onset visual creativity in frontotemporal dementia. People that weren't interested in the arts before now having a profound passion and talent expressing themselves. And when we talk about frontotemporal dementia, just a brief overview, it's a collection of disorders that are defined, the name defines them. The frontal lobes, the temporal lobes are involved. And they can present in either a manner that is a behavioral disorder or one of two language disorders. And you can see in the slide the differences in the regional anatomies involved. But also, very interestingly, there are underlying causes, pathologies, that associate to different degrees with the symptomatic presentation. And that'll be key a little bit later on. But what Dr. Miller had noticed when he had captured 12 of these cases is that more than almost a third were left-handed. And he wondered, well, gee, could that be important as to why they express this new onset behavior? Maybe there was something in their development that was being unleashed in this setting of the disease. And I wondered, well, gee, could hand preference, could neurodevelopment maybe be relevant to our neurodegenerative disorders? And what I mean by hand preference, left-handedness, essentially 10% of the population is not right-handed. So if you're ambidextrous, you're one of us. If you're left-handed, you're absolutely one of us. There are these associated changes in brain structure based on differences in hand preference. And then Norman Geschwin, the father of behavioral neurology, had noticed that there were some compelling traits, maybe increases in immune disease, maybe increases in dyslexia, this musical giftedness and artistic giftedness. These were some of the concepts that Dr. Miller was thinking about as to why these individuals developed this new onset ability. So in 2009, when I got here, I started looking at all of our patients. At the time, I think we only had about 10,000 folks. Now you number in 30,000, so the growth here has been meteoric. And I looked at all of our patients at the Memory and Aging Center in our database, and 10% of you were left-handed. So essentially, I found nothing. I looked at only the Alzheimer cases, and 10% of individuals with Alzheimer's were not right-handed. So again, I found nothing. I looked at the frontotemporal dementia cases. 10% were not right-handed. Again, I'm finding nothing, and it's getting more dire. But I'm still here. So obviously, after looking at these particular language cases and finding nothing, I struck gold. Something that I really hope is going to be a fundamental sort of discovery here, that in this case, this last group, this language group, one of the two language forms of frontotemporal dementia had twice the number of non-right-handedness. And actually another group had half the amount, and the last group arguably was just right. So now all of a sudden we had a clue that neurodevelopment maybe is playing a role in our disorders. And going down the list of the other features in the Geschwin-Galiberto hypothesis, I looked at learning disability. And sure enough, we found that in a language form of Alzheimer's disease, they had more than twice the amount of something like developmental dyslexia. And that having dyslexia mattered in folks that had dyslexia and this language disease versus folks that didn't have dyslexia and this language disease. Those with dyslexia presented with a more focal insult 10 years earlier and had greater preservation of global cognition. So it matters who you are if you succumb to one of our disorders. And beyond that, we went outside of the language developmental disorders. If you have a developmental disorder of the mathematical abilities, all of a sudden that might be a risk factor or somehow teach us something about where Alzheimer's disease attacks or affects you in the brain. And so actually, we try and capture that now. And so maybe many of you have actually filled out this questionnaire in the past where we asked you, how good were you at doing something when we were young? And we're looking for strengths and weaknesses. Further, going down this list, looking at immune diseases, we found this amazing finding that there are more autoimmune diseases, non-thyroid autoimmune diseases, in that same language group that was more left-handed. And so with that, over the years, people have found this same signal. If you knock out particular genes in a mouse that cause FTD, it leads them to develop something like human autoimmune disease. If you look at mutations that cause frontotemporal dementia and ALS, they actually first were known to play roles in immune disease. And this is a study that's sort of hot off the press, or it's unpublished now, so you're seeing it before the press, that across all of our disorders that are unified by this particular neurodegenerative disease called TDP-43 versus the tau disorders, all the TDP-43 diseases have more autoimmune disease. So this might be a novel biomarker and a new avenue towards treatments. And it's all coming from the work we've been doing with you all here. And this is just a listing of all the kinds of autoimmune diseases we see. but basically this led to an entire new hypothesis for how people get disease, how we might intervene. And so I think how you're built matters, the life you live matters, and that together we're going to make a big difference by going deeper into these kinds of questions. So thank you very much. These are the individuals that were really seminal into helping build these projects, but more importantly, thanks to you all